Behind every locked door lies a story the world was never meant to hear. Welcome to Behind Bars TV, where we uncover the hidden realities of the world's toughest prisons, untold inmate experiences, and the systems built to contain them. From supermax facilities to forgotten penitentiaries, we revealed the truth behind concrete walls and razor wire. This is not fiction. This is the world behind bars. Most corrupt Cook County Jail, Illinois, government negligence. Oversight failure. A system that broke itself. Full crime documentary. In downtown Chicago, beneath the glass towers and government buildings, there is a place where the law quietly collapses. Not in riots, not in chaos, but in silence. A place designed to hold people temporarily, yet capable of destroying them permanently. This is not a story about one bad guard, or one corrupt official, or one tragic mistake. This is the story of a system that failed so completely that it no longer knew the difference between control and cruelty. This is Cook County Jail, and this is how it became one of the most corrupt detention facilities in America. Before we begin, this documentary took months of research, public records, court filings, and investigative reporting. If you value real accountability journalism, support this channel by subscribing. Because stories like this only survive when people keep watching. A jail built to hold, not to care. Cook County Jail is not a prison. That distinction matters. It is a pre-trial detention center, meaning most people inside have not been convicted of a crime. They are legally innocent. And yet, for decades, this facility operated as if guilt was already decided. At its peak, Cook County Jail was one of the largest single-site jails in the world, holding more than 10,000 detainees at a time. Men and women, teenagers tried as adults, people with mental illness, people arrested for nonviolent offenses, people who simply could not afford bail. This was supposed to be temporary confinement. Instead, it became a pipeline of neglect. From the outside, Cook County Jail looked modernized, updated buildings, new wings, expanded budgets. But inside, the same structural rot persisted. Understaffing, mismanagement, medical failures, a culture of silence, and most dangerously, a lack of oversight so complete that abuse became routine. Negligence as policy. Negligence at Cook County Jail was not accidental. It was systemic. Over multiple administrations, internal reports documented the same failures, over and over again, with little consequence. Inmate-to-staff ratios that violated safety recommendations. Medical units stretched beyond capacity. Mental health treatment delayed for weeks, sometimes months. And when things went wrong, they were buried. Detainees with known psychiatric conditions were placed in isolation. People suffering seizures were dismissed as faking. Emergency call buttons went unanswered. And deaths that should have triggered immediate reform, were treated as administrative inconveniences. Between lawsuits, federal investigations, and watchdog reports, one pattern emerged clearly. Warnings were issued. Recommendations were made. Nothing changed. The mental health warehouse. At one point, Cook County Jail was described by legal advocates as the largest mental health facility in the state of Illinois. Not because it treated people, but because it confined them. Thousands of detainees entered the jail with diagnosed mental illnesses, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, PTSD. Many more developed symptoms after incarceration. Instead of care, they were met with isolation. Instead of treatment, discipline. Instead of doctors, guards trained to maintain order, not recognize crisis. Solitary confinement became a substitute for psychiatric care. A place where hallucinations worsened, where paranoia intensified, where despair turned fatal. Internal logs documented detainees held alone for 23 hours a day, sometimes longer, for behaviors directly linked to untreated mental illness. And when families asked questions, they were told nothing. This is where the story deepens. Next chapters expose guard corruption and contraband pipelines, use of force cover-ups, sexual abuse allegations, federal oversight failures, lawsuits that quietly cost taxpayers millions, and the deaths that finally forced national attention. Contraband, control, and the shadow economy. Every jail develops a shadow economy. Phones, drugs, weapons, favors. At Cook County Jail, that underground market didn't merely exist, it flourished. Contraband didn't arrive by accident. It arrived through access. Investigations and sworn testimony revealed a pattern. Items entering secure housing units, with help from people who knew the system best. Uniforms, keys, schedules. Cell phones were among the most valuable items inside. They allowed detainees to coordinate assaults, intimidate witnesses, run outside criminal operations, document abuse, sometimes unintentionally exposing it. Phones were discovered taped behind toilets, hidden in mattresses, concealed in food carts. But the volume told a different story. This was not occasional smuggling. It was systemic leakage. When phones were seized, disciplinary action was inconsistent. Some officers were suspended, others reassigned. Many cases quietly disappeared into internal affairs files. And for detainees caught with contraband, punishment was swift: isolation, segregation, loss of privileges. Two systems of accountability, one visible, one protected. Use of force, and the paper that erased it. Use of force inside a jail is supposed to follow strict rules. It must be necessary, proportional, documented. At Cook County Jail, the paperwork often mattered more than the incident. Detainees reported beatings during cell extractions, use of chemical agents in enclosed spaces, physical restraints applied for hours, sometimes long after resistance had ended. But when internal reviews occurred, reports frequently matched each other, not surveillance footage. Language repeated verbatim across different incidents. Phrases like, inmate became combative, officer feared for safety, force ceased when compliance was achieved. Words that insulated actions from consequence. In several cases, video evidence later contradicted written accounts. Yet discipline remained rare. The system rewarded consistency, not accuracy. And for detainees without lawyers, without media attention, without outside advocates, the record became reality. Medical care delayed, denied, deflected. Medical care inside Cook County Jail was not merely under-resourced. It was fragmented. Health care services were outsourced, layered through contractors, administrators, and approval chains that slowed every response. Emergencies required authorization. Medication required verification. Specialist visits required patience detainees did not have. Court filings described detainees waiting days, sometimes weeks, to see a doctor. Diabetics missed insulin doses. Asthmatics went without inhalers. Infections worsened untreated. In the most severe cases, symptoms were dismissed as exaggeration. And when conditions escalated, blame moved upward or nowhere at all. Several deaths inside the jail raised alarms about medical neglect. Autopsies revealed untreated conditions. Families described frantic phone calls, unanswered grievances, silence after hospitalization. Internal reviews followed. Reforms were promised. Budgets increased. But the core structure remained the same. The pattern emerges. Contraband, force, medical failure. Each problem was treated as separate, but they were connected by one constant, a system designed to protect itself first. Oversight existed, on paper, but enforcement required will, and will required pressure, silence, sexual abuse, and power without witnesses. Jails run on power. Who controls movement? Who controls access? Who decides what gets written down? Inside Cook County Jail, that imbalance created conditions where sexual abuse allegations surfaced again and again, often quietly, often without resolution. Multiple lawsuits filed over the years described inappropriate contact, coercion, and retaliation. Detainees reported being threatened with loss of privileges, segregation, delayed court transport, if they spoke up. In a jail where communication with the outside world was limited, silence became survival. Investigations were technically initiated, But they relied on internal interviews, staff testimony, incomplete camera coverage, and the outcome was predictable. Cases stalled, evidence insufficient, officers transferred, not terminated. For victims still incarcerated, justice felt theoretical. The whistleblowers, who hit a wall. Not everyone inside Cook County Jail accepted what they saw. Some officers, some nurses, some administrators. They filed complaints, wrote memos, raised alarms, described chronic understaffing, unsafe housing assignments, pressure to alter reports, retaliation after speaking out, reassignments, schedule changes, professional isolation. The message was subtle but clear. The institution protects the institution. Oversight agencies were notified, but oversight depended on access, and access depended on cooperation. The jail complied just enough to appear transparent, while maintaining control over what outsiders could see. Oversight in name only. Cook County Jail was not unmonitored. It was under-enforced. County officials received reports. Federal agencies issued findings. Independent monitors made recommendations. But oversight without consequences is theater. Reports cited the same failures year after year. Inadequate mental health care, excessive use of force, poor training, weak accountability. Yet leadership turnover rarely produced structural change. Each new administration promised reform. Each inherited the same machinery. And, as time passed, something dangerous happened. Abnormal conditions became normal. Staff adapted. Detainees endured. The public stopped paying attention, until death made that impossible. The point of no return. By the time national attention returned to Cook County Jail, the damage was already deep. Lives had been lost. Lawsuits had piled up. Millions of dollars in settlements had been paid quietly. And still, the jail remained open, still operating, still detaining thousands. Deaths that could not be ignored. Deaths inside jails are not always sudden. Sometimes they are slow, predictable, documented, long before the final moment. At Cook County Jail, several deaths triggered lawsuits not because they were mysterious, but because they were preventable. Court records describe detainees who repeatedly requested medical attention. Symptoms logged, grievances filed, warnings ignored. In some cases, detainees were found unresponsive in their cells after hours without checks. In others, medical emergencies escalated while staff debated protocol. Each death followed the same administrative rhythm. Internal review, expression of regret, no admission of wrongdoing, and then silence. For families, information came late. Phone calls unanswered, records delayed, details incomplete. By the time answers arrived, trust was already gone. Lawsuits, settlements, and the cost of failure. When accountability does not arrive internally, it comes through the courts. Over the years, Cook County faced numerous civil lawsuits alleging wrongful death, excessive force, medical neglect, civil rights violations. Many cases never reached trial. They ended in settlements. Settlements meant no admission of guilt, but they carried a price. Millions of dollars paid using public funds. Taxpayer money absorbed the cost of systemic failure, while the underlying conditions remained largely unchanged. For county leadership, settlements were cheaper than reform. For families, no amount of money replaced what was lost. Patterns emerged in legal filings. Repeated defendants. Similar allegations. Identical failures cited across years. The lawsuits did not describe isolated incidents. They described policy outcomes. When the system normalized harm. By the time reforms were publicly discussed, something irreversible had happened. Harm had become routine. Staff adapted to understaffing by cutting corners. Medical delays became expected. Use of force reports read like templates. And detainees learned a simple truth. Complaints rarely changed outcomes. Normalization is the most dangerous phase of institutional failure. Because once harm is expected, it no longer alarms. It becomes part of the job, part of the intake, part of the cost. And, at Cook County Jail, that normalization lasted years. The question nobody answered: if oversight existed, if reports were written, if lawsuits exposed the truth, why did it take so long for anything to change? The answer lies not inside the jail, but above it, and the art of deflection. Cook County Jail did not operate in a vacuum. Budgets were approved. Contracts were signed. Leadership was appointed. Every failure inside the jail passed through layers of political decision-making. And yet, when scandal surfaced, responsibility became strangely difficult to locate. When questioned about conditions, officials pointed elsewhere. Sheriff's offices blamed medical contractors. Contractors blamed staffing shortages. County leaders blamed inherited problems. Each statement technically true, none fully accountable. Oversight hearings produced soundbites, not structural change. And behind closed doors, the jail continued operating exactly as before. Public outrage faded faster than institutional inertia. Elections came and went. Leadership changed names, not systems. And the people inside the jail felt the consequences long after the headlines disappeared. Reforms announced, reality unchanged. In response to mounting pressure, reforms were announced. New training programs, updated policies, expanded mental health units. On paper, progress looked real. But inside the jail, change arrived slowly, if at all. Staff shortages persisted. Medical delays continued. Use of force complaints remained consistent. The structure absorbed reform language without altering daily practice. Because reform without enforcement is cosmetic. Some improvements did occur, limited, localized, fragile. But they depended on leadership continuity. And continuity was rare. Each administrative reset meant retraining, restructuring, and relearning the same lessons. At human cost, the people left inside. While systems debated responsibility, people remained detained. Some for weeks, some for months, some for years awaiting trial. Their lives paused inside a facility struggling to meet even basic standards of care. For detainees with mental illness, incarceration often meant deterioration. For families, it meant unanswered calls and constant fear. For communities, it meant instability recycled back onto the streets. Cook County Jail did not just confine individuals. It amplified harm outward. And still, despite investigations, lawsuits, and reform efforts, the fundamental question remained unanswered. How many failures are acceptable before a system is considered broken? By the time public attention returned once more, Cook County Jail had become something else entirely. Not just a detention center, but a case study in how neglect survives in plain sight. What happens next would decide whether the system could change, or whether history would simply repeat itself. Federal intervention, too late, too limited. When local oversight failed, attention shifted upward. Federal authorities reviewed conditions, policies, and patterns that local systems had failed to correct. Their findings echoed what advocates had said for years. Mental health care was inadequate. Use of force oversight was weak. Accountability mechanisms were ineffective. Consent decrees and monitoring agreements promised change. They required new reporting standards, independent evaluations, policy rewrites. But federal intervention came with limits. Monitors could observe. They could recommend. They could document. They could not run the jail. Progress under federal scrutiny was incremental, fragile. Compliance was measured in metrics, not lived experience. And when attention shifted elsewhere, momentum slowed. Reform remained conditional. Resistance from within. Not all resistance to reform came from leadership. Some came from within the ranks. Change threatened routine. New policies meant new paperwork. New oversight meant scrutiny. New standards meant accountability. For staff already overworked and undertrained, reform felt like punishment, not support. Some complied quietly. Others resisted openly. and a few undermined changes altogether. Training sessions were attended, not always absorbed. Policies were acknowledged, not always followed. The culture that had developed over decades did not dissolve easily. It adapted. A system that survived its own failures. Despite everything, lawsuits, deaths, investigations, the jail remained open. Still operating. Still crowded. Still imperfect. Institutions rarely collapse under the weight of their failures. They persist. They adapt just enough to survive. Cook County Jail did not implode. It endured. And endurance became its most dangerous feature. Because survival, without transformation, preserve harm. By now, the question was no longer whether corruption and neglect existed. The record was clear. The question was whether the system would ever be forced to change, not by reports or lawsuits, but by public will. The final reckoning. The story of Cook County Jail is not finished. It is ongoing, and its ending depends on what happens when attention fades. Again, the cost that never makes the headlines. The damage caused by Cook County Jail did not end the gates. It traveled outward, into neighborhoods, into families, into courtrooms already overwhelmed. Former detainees left the jail with more than court dates. They left with worsened mental health, untreated medical conditions, trauma reinforced by confinement. Many returned to communities without support systems equipped to handle the damage done. Cycles deepened. Instability multiplied. And the same individuals often reappeared in the same system that failed them the first time. Taxpayers paid twice. Once through settlement checks. Again through emergency services, rehospitalizations, and repeat detention. The jail was not just a line item in a budget. It was a long-term liability, quietly compounding. What accountability really means. Accountability is often framed as punishment. A firing. A resignation. A lawsuit won. But real accountability is structural. It is boring. It is slow. It is enforced when nobody is watching. It means staffing levels that meet reality. Medical care that responds to urgency. Mental health treatment that replaces isolation. Oversight with teeth, not press releases. It means admitting failure without waiting for tragedy to force the confession. The story of Cook County Jail is not unique. It is simply well documented. And that documentation leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. Systems do not change because they are exposed. They change when exposure is followed by sustained pressure. The silence after the story. When the cameras leave, the lights stay on. When reports stop circulating, intake continues. And when attention fades, institutions return to what they know best. Routine. Cook County Jail still stands. Still operating. Still holding thousands of people who have not been convicted of a crime. Whether it remains a symbol of neglect or becomes an example of transformation depends on what happens after the story ends. Because the most dangerous systems are not the ones hidden in darkness. They are the ones that survive in plain sight. What you just saw is more than a story. It's a reality lived by thousands behind bars. If you believe in uncovering the truth, the kind hidden behind concrete walls and silence, then join us. Subscribe to Behind Bars TV and never miss a chapter in the world's most dangerous stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and stay locked in. Until next time, keep your mind open and your curiosity sharp. Remember, freedom and confinement are sometimes only a wall apart.